mainstream media channels have covered this as a very serious incident, as something that shouldn't have happened. And we haven't seen, as we've seen at other points throughout this war, the kind of mainstream Israeli media rallying around the government narrative, but rather saying that this is really bad.
The Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has called a double airstrike on Nasser Hospital that killed 20 people a tragic mishap. Among the dead were 5 journalists, including Hassam al-Masri, who worked for Reuters, Miriam Abu Daga from the Associated Press. Netanyahu said the IDF were conducting an investigation into the strikes and said our war is with Hamas terrorists, not civilians. The writer and political analyst Arieh Kovler joins us now from Jerusalem. Welcome to the show. Good morning.
Good morning.
This is clearly a very serious incident. What has been the public reaction in Israel?
Well, Israel right now is very focused on the question of whether there'll be a hostage deal. Today is a day of action for that. This is kind of playing into that conversation about the conduct of the Gaza war. What I would say is that the mainstream media channels have covered this as a very serious incident, as something that shouldn't have happened. And we haven't seen, as we've seen at other points throughout this war, the kind of mainstream Israeli media rallying around the government narrative, but rather saying that this is really bad.
Hamas agreed a week ago to a Gaza ceasefire proposal from Egypt and Qatar. Israel has not responded, even to reject the proposal. Do we know at what stage the negotiations are?
We don't. It seems like things are happening behind the scenes, but it's actually quite unclear right now. The Israeli government's public position remains that they are done with partial hostage deals, and that they're looking for either all or nothing, and that this deal, being a partial deal, is therefore not acceptable. There's a lot of pressure from the right of the government on Netanyahu to say that he must reject this deal. Some of the right-wing parties are demanding a written commitment that he will reject the deal in order to, essentially stay in coalition with him. But we don't know what's going on behind the scenes. There were reports that the chief of staff of the IDF had told the government that this is a good deal and they should take it, but we don't know yet.
Do we know if any role is being played at the moment by Donald Trump? Yesterday, in one of his many press conferences, he mentioned that the conflict may be over within 2 to 3 weeks with, I think he uses the word, a sort of a satisfying outcome or a happy outcome. It's all very garbled when President Trump gives these conferences, the sort of quick-fire conferences. But do you know what he was referring to? Because he was quite specific, 2 to 3 weeks, he thinks the conflict might come to an end.
Well, I mean, Donald Trump's go-to time for when things will be done is 2 to 3 weeks. So right. I wouldn't necessarily put much meaning into that in itself. Honestly, that to me was a sign that he is not particularly engaged with the details right now of what's happening in the region. I think that we will not see Israel agree to this deal without some pressure from the Americans. And Trump's response suggests that at least right now, the Americans' attention is elsewhere, whether that is on Russia, Ukraine, or on domestic issues, like supposedly they're about to sanction a bunch of EU leaders. So who really knows on that? I do think there's always a possibility that if a deal is close, Trump again wakes up, calls Netanyahu and says, you have to agree to this deal. I think if he does that, Netanyahu probably does agree to the deal. But even within the Trump administration, there are different forces at work. As soon as Trump said that thing about 2 to 3 weeks, Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, came up to give a different version of events, that, the war is to destroy Hamas and it might take a while. So we will have to see again.
And just finally, we know that there are big protests taking place today across Israel as the main group advocating for hostages in Gaza holds a day of demonstrations demanding those held captive are brought home. How much of a pressure is this putting on the government, and is it having an effect?
The honest answer is it's not putting a lot of pressure on the government. The government is reliant on the parties to its right. It is not reliant on the forces of the opposition. And right now, the political dynamics in Israel are all about Netanyahu trying to placate the parties on his right and the right of his own party in order to stay in power as long as possible. That said, if Netanyahu decides to change tack in the face of, say, American pressure, he has, these forces in the country that he could draw upon. So we've seen some of the more centrist opposition leaders like Benny Gantz say, if you want to do a hostage deal, I'm prepared to vote for it, even if it means keeping you in power, Netanyahu, even at the risk of my own political career. So in that sense, it's providing the space for alternatives. But the official position remains that Israel is about to launch this massive invasion into Gaza City that could be very risky and costly both for Israelis and for Palestinians.
Arieh, thank you so much for giving us your time. Pleasure to speak. Writer, political analyst Arieh Kovler there, joining us from Jerusalem.
If we could get your reaction, sir. The Israelis bombed a hospital in Gaza that killed 20 people, including 5 journalists.
When did this happen?
This happened overnight, today.
I didn't know that. No.
Any reaction to this? Are you
Well,
going
I'm
to
not
talk
happy
to Prime
about it.
Minister?
I don't want to see it. At the same time, we have to end that whole nightmare. I'm the one that got the hostages out. I got them out. All of them. Steve Witkoff has been amazing. He's done a great job. But I'm the one that got them all out through my people and through me. And now we're left with probably a little bit less than 20 because I think 1 or 2 are gone. And I said a long time ago, I'm going to get them out. But when we get down to that final 10 or 20, these people aren't going to release them because they're dead after they release them. So it's a nasty situation. Very nasty, horrible thing. Yes.
Including children. The guy needs to be in prison. He doesn't.
Despite the ongoing communication between Madam High Representative and the Israeli authorities, the yesterday slaughters of journalists, which came...
The killing of 5 journalists, 4 health workers and a number of civilians in Gaza yesterday by an Israeli strike which targeted the Nasser Hospital, leaving at least 20 people killed, is completely unacceptable. Civilians and journalists must be protected under international law. There have been too many fatalities in this conflict. It must end now. Civilians in Gaza have been suffering for far too long and far too much, and it is time to break the cycle of violence and of suffering. We reiterate our call on Israel to respect international humanitarian law and to ensure that these attacks are investigated, noting the statement by the Israeli authorities that a thorough investigation will be conducted.